recorded. And to introduce myself, I'm Ivars Lapiņš. I'm Counselor of the Ministry of Agriculture of Latvia, and I'm privileged to do a moderation of the first session of this fourth dialogue that is co-hosted by Latvia and on economic and biodiversity trade-offs in forest sector. You have received agenda and information on speakers today, this morning from Daiga. If you haven't, put it in a chat and we'll figure out how to send it to you. The event is planned until 15 hours, 3 o'clock Central European Time, Paris time. And a few short housekeeping remarks. First, there will be a video recording that will be made available after the event in the OECD YouTube channel. That's the first thing. Second thing, for the questions, we ask you to provide questions, put the questions in the chat, addressing those questions so that everyone can see them. And we'll have a chat manager, our colleague Raitis Riekstiņš, who will summarize these questions and will put them in the plenary. All presentations normally should be available to you after the event, subject to speakers' consent. And for the speakers, I just like to remind you that in order to have a smooth running of it, in the upper right corner, to choose speaker mode, and then if any doubts, please hide the floating window if that makes any problem for you. So it should be good, and it has been tested, and of course for OECD many times before. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Head of Regional Development and Multi-Governance Division of the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, in short, CFE, at OECD, Dorothée Alain-Dupré. I hope I pronounced your name right. And also followed then directly by our colleague from Latvian Ministry of Agriculture, Aris Jansons, who is Director of Forestry Department. So please, the floor is yours, Dorothée, for introduction.
Thank you very much, Ivars, and from my side, welcome to all in this webinar. It's really a pleasure to open this forest dialogue and to welcome such a distinguished group of experts, policymakers, and stakeholders. So this forest dialogue is part of the OECD Forestry and Rural Development Initiative, which was launched in 2023. It provides an important platform for countries to exchange views and address key challenges facing the forest sector. It recognizes that forestry is closely linked to rural development and should be approached through a multidimensional place-based perspective. Today's event is the fourth webinar on this topic, and it builds on previous dialogues co-hosted by Chile and Costa Rica. I am pleased that this fourth dialogue, co-hosted by the Ministry of Agriculture of Latvia, focuses on a particularly timely issue, forest-related trade-offs, especially the balance between economic value and biodiversity. So I want to warmly thank Latvia for organizing today's discussion and thank Latvia for such an active role in this initiative. Today, we are very honored to have distinguished speakers with us, including representatives from the Montréal Process and the European Forest Institute. Their insights will be complemented by country experiences from Latvia, Austria and Canada, followed by panel discussion. We are also pleased to have with us colleagues from the OECD Environmental Directorate, who will contribute through their perspective on the trade-off between biodiversity and economic value. So I just want to very briefly highlight why this topic is particularly relevant and also the next steps of this initiative. So why this topic is particularly relevant? You know it very well, forests support economic activity and rural livelihoods while providing essential ecosystem services. At the same time, forests are increasingly expected to deliver multiple benefits simultaneously. Sustainable forest management therefore requires us to carefully balance economic, environmental, and social objectives. In practice, This balance is not easy to achieve. In some cases, economic development and biodiversity conservation can go hand in hand. In others, they may come in direct tension, requiring difficult policy choices. Policymakers cannot avoid these trade-offs, but they need to manage them in a transparent, informed, and forward-looking manner. So we will discuss this today, but clearly two elements are essential to keep in mind. First, the data, because strong policy rely on strong evidence, and indicators help us understand reality, set priorities, and assess outcomes, shaping policy decisions. And second, governance. Managing trade-offs requires well-designed institutions and aligned incentives. It also depends on stakeholder dialogue to build consensus and support informed, legitimate policy choices. The second point I want to briefly highlight is the next step. The discussion we will be having today will feed into the ongoing forestry and rural development case study of Latvia. The OECD team during the mission trip in February this year identified economic and biodiversity trade-off in the forest sector as one of the core topics for the case study. So the case study will be finalized and released at the end of this year, at the end of 2026. Therefore, today's discussion will feed into the preparation of the case study and will be an opportunity to share valuable lessons from other member countries. In addition to Latvia, today's discussion are also very relevant to the other case study that we are conducting, which is focusing on Japan and which will be finalized in early 2027. So I am confident that today's discussion will provide valuable insights, and we really look forward to hearing and to learning from all of you. Thank you very much again for attending this webinar, and I am pleased now to pass the floor to our co-host from Latvia, Mr. Aris Jansson, who is a director in the Ministry of Agriculture of Latvia. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the project team and for OECD to allow this seminar, and for the project team for all the effort that has been going into to those case studies, and also to the initiative itself, which is a very important step towards mutual understanding on how the economic and biodiversity goals can be balanced at a national or international scale. So just to set the stage for the further discussions, I'll have a couple of slides emphasizing that the climate change, permanent loss of forest, meaning deforestation, and use of non-renewable resources are interlinked causes for the global negative effect on the biodiversity. So therefore, to solve the negative trends in the biodiversity, we have a couple of options. One is to stabilize the human population, which is not the topic of this subject, of this seminar. The other one is to reduce use of fossil materials that are linked to all of the above mentioned problems, but therefore we cannot actually go forward with reducing the lifestyle or the quality of life of the people. That approach has been tried with the carbon taxes and other initiatives, even in rich countries, and has led to nowhere. Therefore, the focus has rightly shifted now to replacing that use of materials with bioeconomy. And for that, we need a couple of prerequisites. We need to focus on producing more from less of material. And I will have a couple of examples from Europe. So EU bioeconomy strategy recognizes the need for production from the renewable materials, the need for research and development, because people in general are not really ready to pay more for the same type of goods that they are trying to replace. The problem with the initiatives, including the colleague Global Summit on forest-based bioeconomy approaches, has been that there is very limited emphasis on the forest production. So the emphasis has been so far mainly on producing better quality goods, producing different types of goods from the wood. But to ensure the functioning bioeconomy, we need to increase local on regional forest productivity. Some of the indicators that suggest that is, for example, harvest to increment ratio. There are suggestions floating around saying that to improve the harvest to increment ratio, we need to reduce harvest, but that is not going to help the bioeconomy, so that the other part of this ratio needs to be emphasized. And we need to allow to allocate more land for different uses of society. That means we'll have to produce more for increasing demands in the bioeconomy, but from less of the area. So we'll have to produce more from less, but not more from less wood, but more from less land. So we have to look holistically on all of that production sphere and keep that in mind. Ensure that we have the third component, which is specialization. Globally, we have seen that there are areas with less deforestation where we can focus. Current studies, both in a Global Nature Watch as well as study just a couple of weeks ago in the Nature journals, suggest that global forest deforestation or long-term conversion to other land uses are driven by pasture expansion, followed by croplands and non-timber lands, but only small part, only part of it is permanent losses. Most of it are non-permanent, and that varies from region to region. So Europe is a good place, a good example of temporary changes in forest cover, not a loss of the forest cover. So that's where we can focus our bioeconomy needs. Additionally, we need a regional specialization, and for that purpose, we need to look for the areas where already current response to climate change has been positive in terms of forest productivity, and also the future response to climate change is predicted to be positive in terms of forest productivity. And if we can focus the primary production as a source of regionally available raw material for bioeconomy, that improves the total balance of the biodiversity and economy effect on that region as a whole. And thirdly, specialization nationally, which is not an easy topic, of course. It is plausible. It is not easy, but plausible, and in many cases requires changes in legislation and management practices, where the also OECD initiative comes in. But in many cases, it requires to zoom out from a very fine scale observations. And there I provide just one example from Spain related to eucalyptus, which is rather a controversial tree species. And there are publications also quite recently saying that the eucalyptus stands does not host a lot of diversity. Therefore, we need to diversify those stands. At the same time, 3% of those stands take only 3% of the total forest area in Spain and produce 32% of the total material necessary for pulp and paper industry in this country. So basically, if we zoom out, we see that with a very small share from the total forest landscape, we can ensure a large total production. So the focus at the stand level, which is quite often still seen in the policy debates, is not helping us to ensure simultaneous achievement of both of the goals, the economic goal and the biodiversity goal. With that, I'll leave the thoughts for you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Aris and Dorothy. Thank you for this rich introduction. Now we will do one little thing. Hopefully that all folks are in front of your screens, and we would like to ask everyone to switch on your camera so that we can take some group photos. I'll wait for a few seconds so that all the videos come up. So nice to see you all. Please bear with us. We will take some screenshots now, and when we are done, I'll tell you that you can feel free to switch it off. So still in the process. I see that some folks don't want to share their videos, which is of course totally okay. Maybe you have something nasty in your background, or maybe not. I think we are pretty much done. Okay, I see Mia also switched on her camera. Just one more time. Hey there. Okay. I think we're done. Thanks very much to everyone. Now we go straight into presentations. First of all, let me remind all speakers that there will be a time limit because we have very rich agenda. You have the countdown timer that will be switched on, and that is on the top of your screen. So hopefully you can see that. And every speaker in this first session has maximum 7 minutes. We will try to have 2 or at best, which I am doubtful, 3 minutes at best, but or 4 questions and answers for each speaker. So after each speaker, there will be possibility that during this presentation, you can put your questions or comments in the chat, especially questions to speakers. And as I said, writers will gather them together. So now the first session is on setting the scene on current state of forests. And we are extremely happy to be with Graham Stinson in this event, who has agreed to present the Montreal Process. So he's chair of the Montreal Process Working Group. But more or less importantly, depending on how you look at it, he's also Director of Forest Information in Canadian Forest Service, Canada. So Graham, over to you, please.
Yes, hello, colleagues. I am literally sharing my whole screen, so I can only see my
Yes, you do. Thanks very much.
slide. I hope you can see it as well.
Yes, full screen is okay. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, with these excellent setting of the table for this dialogue, it's my pleasure to give us a brief look at the current situation in forests. Of course, sustainable forest management means managing forests for multiple values and benefits to people, including biodiversity and economics as the focus of today's dialogue. But of course, you see here with the Montreal Process, we've set up a system of criteria and indicators looking across 7 criteria. And for monitoring progress towards the management for all 7, we have a system behind them of 54 indicators. And the challenge is to track informative indicators for successfully guiding our practice. So what is the current situation in temperate and boreal forests around the world? Forest area is generally stable to increasing in Montreal Process member countries overall. We also see increasing protected forest area, but biodiversity conservation remains a concern in some areas. We have increasing insect and fire disturbance. I know we've certainly been in the news in Canada in many years globally, and we're already into our fire season here now. Increasing industrial roundwood production is also a trend we're seeing, except notably in North America. Forest-based employment has been steadily declining, and drivers of forest change affecting forests are multiple, of course, climate change in many complex ways. We also have an increasing policy and public recognition of forest ecosystem services. And we have a trend that I sort of simply call in one word digitization. And this is where forestry is becoming increasingly a very precise, data-driven process. So how do we know all this? Let's look at the data. Now we are tracking criteria and indicators for domestic reporting in each of the Montreal Process member countries. And we either use the Montreal Process criteria and indicators exactly out of the system that's been built collectively by the process, or we use our own domestic variants. I've put up an image here of Australia's and Canada's State of the Forest reports as examples. And member countries have also teamed up recently to produce a synthesis report just a couple of years ago. And I've put up images of a few graphs from this report as examples. We don't have time to dive deeply into the indicator data today, but my point is there are a lot of reporting data available. The Global Forest Resource Assessment online platform also serves as a common reporting tool for partners of the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire. I've taken a bit of a risk here by providing this link in the middle of my presentation. Now half of you will be exploring the data while I'm trying to keep your attention. I'll invite you to go in later at your convenience. I was just recently at a meeting with colleagues at the Food and Agriculture Organization Forestry Department, and they're already planning some very exciting advances to this platform. And I really look forward to seeing the progress that they make. What you see online already is, I think, a very good tool for exploring the data. And I hope you will agree. So how confident can we be in the data? Some sources, such as national forest inventories, are robust by design. They're designed by statisticians and practitioners to be statistically unbiased with quantified uncertainty. That way, you know you're looking at data that are accurate and you know how precise they are. The trick with these data is that their costly sampling lengthens remeasurement cycles and limits small area estimation. So you can come up with highly statistically robust estimates, but for large areas. Remote sensing provides comprehensive time series coverage at scale, but you're not directly measuring the attributes you're interested in. So there's modeling involved, and the uncertainty can be difficult to quantify, and often it's downplayed. Analytical capabilities are advancing at an unprecedented speed, and I personally think what was once science fiction is or will soon be possible. But these novel advances are going to create novel bias and uncertainty challenges where statisticians will say, I cannot tell you the uncertainty of that result. And we're going to have to confront how to bring these novel information sources together and understand, well, how much confidence do I put in those data? Fair data principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, open data standards, interoperable services like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, data as a service. These make data more accessible than ever before. We can mobilize data, we can integrate them, we can synthesize them. And so there's much more data available to practitioners, much more data available to policymakers. Many reports are coming from diverse sources, and we're going to see more coming. We live in an absolutely information-rich era. There's better information overall, but there's noise, misinformation, and hallucinations from AI that are going to create challenges. I encourage information consumers to be curious and open-minded while maintaining healthy degrees of skepticism. Scientists, of course, are trained to do this. And I come from a science background, so I don't know exactly how difficult it is for colleagues from other disciplines to cultivate these approaches. It's critically important because the proliferation of highly convincing information sources has only just begun, and people will be employing powerful agents with incredible cleverness to sway opinions. So economic and biodiversity trade-offs in the forest sector. Let's circle back to the task at hand for my last slide. I'll close with two questions. The first here is principally a challenge for the forest data people like myself and my teams on how we can do better to serve the policy community with data information in helpful formats on helpful platforms. The second question has to do with taking a broader perspective. Forests are ecosystems, and when you pull any management or policy lever, all of the others will move in response. It's not just a trade-off between biodiversity and economics. All the interconnected values will respond too. What's more, there may be both immediate responses and delayed responses. There may be second and third order effects. I'm sure we can all think of examples of these and appreciate how important it is to take them into consideration. I think the answer to the first question is to build our capabilities on the information side, from reporting on individual indicators. As you can see here, I initiated my presentation with a list of criteria, and behind there are 54 indicators, moving from that to forecasting overall system behaviors. And this is sort of moving over to the other side where we show all of the interconnections and account for all of the interconnections across.
Yeah, Graham, I'm sorry, just to note that the time is nearly up, or really is up. So if you can round up, please, that'd be great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I am at the end, so that is very well timed on my part. I'll have to congratulate myself. And thank our moderator for giving me the opportunity to present. I hope my presentation has been helpful today.
Thanks very much indeed. We would like to, however, allow, if there's any question, just one question from the audience, if there is one, that if somebody is eager to ask something, but I didn't see anything in the chat. So I take this as a presentation that is super clear. The only one small question that I wanted to ask, actually from my side, is you didn't touch upon updates, and if you are going to update in the Montréal process any of these indicators that are forest sector specific. Maybe you can give a super short reply to that one. Thank you.
Yes, so there's a couple processes, and one, of course, is we're trying to increase the timeliness of our reporting and updating the data behind all of the indicators, but also the Montreal Process member countries are currently running a survey. We're asking ourselves which of the indicators are more useful, which are less useful, and we're working towards the idea of refining our framework. And this may involve dropping some indicators. 54 is a very large number. It may also involve the creation of new indicators. And of course, there are things like forest degradation, which are multidimensional, and they're not individual indicators. They're going to involve analysis across multiple indicators.
Thanks very much for this swift and prompt and very short reply. Very rich presentations. We'll go now to the next speaker, who is Professor Bart Muis from European Forest Institute. And to you, Bart, but also to other speakers, I would be like super happy if you were able to save some time. But if not, you have, of course, your maximum promised 7 minutes from now on, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, can you see my full screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will continue to explore a bit the biodiversity production relationships in forestry and look at the synergies and trade-offs. And I will start with a life cycle assessment study that we made, where we compared forestry systems with agriculture systems on the same site. And we do that through a gradient of here to the left, multifunctional oak forest with long rotations up to very intensive poplar systems with short rotations. And what we see that in all cases, the forestry systems have a lower land use impact than the agriculture systems on the same place. And how do we explain that? Well, the main issue that they have much less mechanized interventions. If you look, for example, at the multifunctional forest system here, it has a thinning operation every 10 years, while the agriculture system on the same place has more than 10 mechanized interventions in a year. So that's a factor 100 difference in land use impact. Also, most of the forest systems do not use fertilizers. And only the last system here, the intensive poplar system in the Po Valley in Italy, uses biocides and irrigation. So most forestry systems are quite extensive, which explains that they have a low land use impact. This is then also confirmed if we look at the trends in forest biodiversity proxies at the continental scale in Europe using the national forest inventories. This is data by Forest Europe, which is also known as the former Helsinki process. And you see that over the years, the amount of lying and standing dead wood in forests in Europe is increasing. And the same is true for the tree species mixtures. So the amount of monocultures is decreasing, the two species mixtures and also the four species mixtures are increasing all over the place. So good news is that the whole story? No, if we look then at a theoretical approach where we look into the succession of a forest from pioneer forest to late successional forest, then we see that most productive forests which are used for forest production, they are in this pioneering up to mature stages, while biodiversity is at highest in the later successional stages, where you have old trees, dead trees, collapse, open areas, regeneration gaps, and so on. So theoretical, there's a kind of mismatch between the type of forest which is optimal for biodiversity and the type of forest which is optimal for production. How can we evaluate that? In Europe, we have another system to evaluate, which is not the same as the national forest inventories, and which goes through the Habitat Directive, Article 17, where for specific important forest habitats, there is an evaluation of the state of the good state of conservation. And in the latest reporting period, we see that only 14% of European forests is in a good state of conservation. Of course, and unfortunately, this is not the full story, because if we look at the original data where this comes from, about half of European forest habitats are in good state of conservation. But due to the assessment methods, which use, for example, in this step, a one out, all out principle. So if one criterion is bad, then all the others are bad. And also the thresholds that are used between good and bad, for example, here in the parameter structure and function, from the moment that 25% of your area is bad, it all becomes bad. And this explains that we have like a cascade of ever worse results from the field assessments in the member states until the European reporting. So good forests are turned into bad. And it's really a problem of assessment and communication that we explained here in this recent paper. And that gives the impression that all forests in Europe would be in a bad state. In the first place, it's only about 30% of the forest, and you have this cascade, which is not leading to let's say, the stimulation of good practice and continuous improvement. If we look to monitoring, we have two big systems. We have the NFIs, which show diversity gain, and we have the Habitat Directive that shows a diversity loss. We have seen that they have a different approach, that they look into different things. But anyway, we can improve
power walking.
Sorry, what is the problem?
Can somebody switch off the mic, please, when not speaking as a speaker, please?
Okay, thank you. So what can be done? Better transparent communication and a better assessment method for the Habitat Directive. boost NFIs. They have been designed for wood production evaluation, but they have to open up more and more also into biodiversity. That is done already through assessment of dead wood and forest mixture, but we can do much better by involving high-tech sensoring. Think about environmental DNA, ground-based LiDARs, drone imagery, camera traps, pitfall trapping, and so on. Also sound recording to know which bird species are around. Citizen science is also used, but we have to be aware about the lots of biases which can be corrected through statistical approaches. In the end, what to think about the management in the field itself. And we need to think more about what we call a triad management at landscape scale. And triad management is like a combination of land sharing and land sparing approaches. Land sharing means that we have a lot of forest into multifunctional forest management, which provides lots of ecosystem services at the same time. Land sparing means that we have areas of pure conservation, like there's genetic conservation units, for example, and then very intensive plantations where we produce the wood, like in the example of the eucalypt plantations. So in the landscape, we have a mixture of pure conservation, a lot of multifunctional, and then also some part in intensive. Important to understand in this triad approach is that if we want to increase the area of full conservation and keeping our wood production at the same level, that we would have to switch from part of the multifunctional into a larger area of intensive. One thing is also a very important point of attention is our strong fix and dogmatic fix on native species. With climate change adaptation, we have to take a broader definition of native, like, for example, native European, rather than using native in a very limited geographic context.
Bart, I'm sorry, can you round this up here, please?
Yes, I come to my take-home messages. So forestry has overall low land use impact. NFI show a positive trends in forest biodiversity. The Habitat Directive shows a negative impact, but that has to do with different methods and also a lack of communication. Monitoring can be improved by improving high tech in the National Forest Inventory plots. And triad management is really the way to go, a clever mix of land sharing and land sparing approaches that maximize the synergies and minimize the trade-offs between biodiversity and production. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Moes. Thank you, Bart, for this presentation. I see one question in the chat. So if you do see your chat yourself, then or writers can spell it out, please. Could you maybe react to this question?
Thank you for the presentation. There is one question. What changes in assessment of habitat quality would you suggest, if any?
Yeah, so the problem in the habitat quality assessment done by the European Environment Agency in the Article 17 of the Habitat Directive is very strong in turning good assessments into bad. So it's very severe, but the result is that you get a very biased result. Imagine that in the with the restoration law, we do the effort to improve our good habitat from 25% to 70%. The current assessment system will still keep it bad because it's below this 25 threshold of bad. So it's a system which is not stimulating continuous improvements. It's a system that demotivates forest managers and also countries to do efforts towards a better management for biodiversity.
Okay.
It's all explained in the paper. Huh?
Okay, thanks very much. As the time flies, we are going straight into next presentation, which will be presented by Dr. Peter Holmgren from Future Vistas, Sweden. So, Peter, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. I'll try and very quickly go back to the theme of the seminar, which is trade-offs between economics and biodiversity. And to do that, I wanted to start off by this point that we see we're exposed to many different ways of presenting where biodiversity is going. This is one. I'm not saying it's the best or the worst or anything, but if you look at this red list index, which is developed by BirdLife and IUCN, it appears that there are some regions that are worse off than others, and I'm happy to see that my own country, Sweden, is looking pretty good, at least in this picture. I'm now going to go into 4 points on the topic of the seminar. The first one is that the efficiency in nature conservation is often not addressed. By that, I mean that if we now are going to see nature conservation as an important part of the economy, then we also need to apply principles such as scarcity, opportunity cost, and efficiency. That's usually missing from conservation aims and policy. Instead, we hear very sweeping statements like 30% of land should be protected, as we recognize from CBD and then also from the EU policies. There is no looking at the efficiency of that conservation. So therefore, instead, we need much more stringent approaches to costs, losses, and benefits from conservation measures. Otherwise, it will be impossible to develop good policy. We also need wider and more integrated options for conservation that can help drive such efficiency. For example, we need to, as has been said already, we need to balance different goals with the forest management in different locations, and that will mean different tools and different needs for integration between different management goals. Secondly, we often hear about climate and forests, we often hear about biodiversity and forests, and very often we are told that these two aims are going hand in hand, but that's actually not true. The climate and biodiversity aims are not aligned in forests. And the reason for that is that climate benefits from forests come from storing carbon in forests and also in wood-based products. And secondly, from the role of wood-based products to displace fossil-based alternatives. Both of these are highest from actively managed forests. But we're usually told that biodiversity benefits from forests are mainly associated with unmanaged forests or less intensively managed forests. And at the same time, biodiversity benefits in actively managed forests are often overlooked. So the main point here is that we have to separate the climate and biodiversity aims. We cannot allow policy discussions to assume that these are working hand in hand, because they are not. Third, the role of biodiversity for the economy, it appears to be both overstated and under-evidenced in politics. An example, in June 2026, the EU Commissioner Roosevelt at the EU Green Week said that every single euro invested in restoring degraded ecosystems generates up to 38 euros in economic returns. This number is honestly not being built on sound financial analysis. It is not an investment grade statement. It's built on various forms of counterfactual analysis that are not really stringent. In addition, the original paper that said 38 actually mentioned a range 4 to 38. Even 4 is pretty up in the air. But if I was Commissioner Roosevelt, I would take a serious talk with her speech writer and communicators. The World Economic Forum has had a report on the new nature economy. And it's another of these one-liners that we often hear about. Half of the world's GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature. And that's connected with 25% of our assessed plant and animal species are threatened by human actions, with 1 million species facing extinction, many within decades. These are quotes. Again, these are very much up in the air statements, and it's impossible to, in a way, take them seriously from an investment or policy perspective. So there are some possible improvements here. Fourth, the situation we have is actually one of poor knowledge and simplified policy, and that creates problems. Science, to be honest, has not delivered well on the knowledge and methods for integrated decisions on biodiversity, despite several decades in the workings. Studies that you read and try to follow and analyze and aggregate, they are fragmented and unsystematic. There is very little decision support coming out of the science, and that is continues to be an issue. Instead, we are preach one-liners that are said to be based on science, like 1 million species are threatened with extinction, IPBES, or 80% of European habitats are in poor condition, European Commission. This leads us to a situation where a foggy knowledge situation underpins an opinionated policy with imprecise measures. That's where we are. And if you, as I am, very concerned with biodiversity, we need to see some improvements here. Otherwise, we are lost. So after those words, I will show you some examples of a slightly better situation. Already mentioned in previous speeches were national forest inventories. In Sweden, we've had one for more than 100 years. And that, of course, it actually includes several biodiversity indicators. And that, of course, gives us the possibility to analyze situations also at a more local level. And on the next slide, I will show you some examples from the Swedish company SCA's holdings in northern Sweden, where we have used NFI data to establish what the trends are. And as I think some others mentioned already, there's the good development of deadwood, there's a good development of deciduous trees or tree species variation. There's a good development of old deciduous trees, of old forests, and also of old forests with specific indications of conservation values. And this is in the managed forest landscape. So it is possible to have data and analysis that show what's going on in the forest. But we need to take a serious look at what we're provided.
Your time is up, sorry. Can you round it up, please?
I just did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I see now the question in the chat, but this is addressed to Bart Moyes. I would suggest that we are not taking this question right away. We'll spare it for discussion part later on. The question is if there's any question maybe to Peter right away. If not, we would love to go straight into the next part, and hopefully that there will be maybe some questions addressed to what Peter was showing with his very rich presentation as well. And we go straight into lessons. So on a policy dialogue for the national perspectives. And I hope that Nora White, who is Deputy Chief Forester in British Columbia from Canada, is with us. And I hope, Nora, if
Good
you
morning.
could...
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we do hear you well. And please
Excellent.
go ahead.
Hello.
And I hope if you have a presentation, as you, I know, do, could you share that, please, in full screen mode, if you will?
Are you not seeing it right now?
Not yet, no. We are
Okay.
seeing you.
Okay.
Very nice landscape in the background, but not presentation yet.
Oh dear. Okay.
You have to share your screen. Yeah, I think it's coming up. Excellent. Full screen mode.
Excellent.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
All right, going ahead. Good day. My name is Nora White, and I currently serve as BC's Deputy Chief Forester. So today I'd like to discuss forestry in BC from my viewpoint, which is primarily forest management and forest stewardship. Over the next few slides, I'm going to try to illustrate the scale and complexity that's involved in decision-making in British Columbia, and then a few quick examples. So to begin, I'd like to move through a few maps very quickly. First, BC's 95% publicly managed land, and 2/3 of this area is forested. So our forestry planning and practices are effectively a landscape governance framework in our province. BC is also the most biodiverse jurisdiction in Canada, with 14 unique ecosystem zones and over 100 unique variants. The left-hand figure here shows our publicly managed forest lands. It's a combination of the green and the pink. And then the economic and legally harvestable areas are in pink only. So it gives you a sense of where some of the trade-offs have been made already. The map on the right shows our area-based rights allocated throughout the province of BC, where trade-offs occur spatially within the borders of the areas shown. You can also see on this map that our provincial forest management boundaries are there in black. In British Columbia, there's over 200 separate and distinct First Nations within the province, many with overlapping interests. And the population, the general population of BC, is estimated just under 6 million today and increasing. And all of this is essentially concentrated in the southern metropolitan regions of the province. So taken together, the maps that I've just shown you, I hope will help to illustrate the diversity that shapes the people and the cultures and the values, and ultimately our forest policy frameworks and practices that we have in the province. We have a very formal system, of course, then for decision-making in forestry in order to account for the complexity that we have on the land base. Our system is highly centralized in law with decisions delegated to various officials, generally kind of shown on this slide here. We also have regulated independent forest professionals that make site-level trade-offs and gather operational feedback from the public. Overseeing all of this, BC also has an independent forest practices board that reports publicly on the state of forest systems and practices. And I would say altogether, our systems, the origin of this system is well over 100 years old. I want to point out that today an important governance tension is now emerging. In my view, we've seen efforts to improve efficiency and reduce administrative costs, and these tend, of course, to favor centralized decision-making, while the growing role of First Nations in land use and forest stewardship calls for a more localized and decentralized approach. So our challenge right now is finding a decision-making model that can really achieve both efficiency and legitimacy. A quick study for you in old growth. BC's forest management system was built around timber production, which meant that old growth conservation has been largely treated as a stark trade-off between economic and environmental values. In 2020, a report challenged that paradigm, calling for a fundamental shift towards stewardship that better balances biodiversity, Indigenous interests, and economic outcomes. And the recommendations, which I've shown here on this slide, generated significant debate and concern across our sector. In response, the provincial government launched an unprecedented province-wide engagement involving the public, stakeholders, and all 200 First Nations across the province. Through a year of discussions, meetings, conferences, and direct engagement between First Nations and our provincial cabinet, a new path forward for forest stewardship was co-developed. It was one of the first forest policy processes of this scale to create sustained and direct dialogue between First Nations and the provincial government. A key challenge in this, I think, was shifting from a system focused on managing constraints to one that starts by understanding the ecological capacity of the forest first. Despite differing viewpoints, as you would imagine on this, there was broad agreement on one principle, which is that if we take care of the land will take care of us. The process also highlighted the importance of scale. Across BC, the diversity that I showed in my first few slides really shapes local cultures, values, and expectations, making old growth a profoundly place-based issue. At the same time, provincial interests in managing a public resource, of course, remain important. My final reflection on this is on the critical importance of trust. In this process, we focus first on how to engage people and not just what to discuss. In forestry, of course, difficult conversations are inevitable, and trust is what makes them productive. 2 years later, come to today, BC is considering zoning, and we heard Triad mentioned already, as a tool for us for considering trade-offs at the landscape level. The idea itself is not new, of course, and today's approach being considered is more sophisticated than previous attempts that we've had here in BC, and reflects, I think, similar conversations that are happening now across Canada. What stands out to me are the contrasts with the process I just described in old growth. There is right now greater urgency to stabilize harvest levels and preserve manufacturing capacity. We saw an earlier trend where North America is one of the jurisdictions that has decreasing roundwood production. Many reasons for that. There's also pressure to move quickly, which may influence the nature and extent of engagement that's possible on this topic. And finally, while the purpose of zoning is still being defined, The discussion currently appears focused on managing trade-offs within our existing system rather than fundamentally redefining how decisions are made, as we discussed in the old growth approach. I can't talk about any of this without mentioning climate change, of course. This is a picture from British Columbia, our largest wildfire on record. It was over 600,000 hectares. This was just several years ago. Wildfire in BC is perhaps the most significant challenge facing forestry. And of course, I mention this because fire is going to reset all of our human work and all of our human efforts. And therefore, it must be the starting assumption in our frameworks and policies. To close, you cannot manage a forest, a landscape, or an ecosystem until you understand what you are managing for, of course. In British Columbia, I believe that the nature of our dialogue, how we conduct it, what we emphasize is changing now. We have a very fragile state of trust within the sector, and we need interaction to uncover the intentions of others. There are strong, long-standing relationships, but power dynamics are changing, and this makes it less certain what motivates partners and collaborators and impacts trust. We need to interact more to uncover assumptions. This means, as I say, more interaction, not less, at a time when budgets and values conflict may compel us to actually retreat from engagement and dialogues. We need to realize that many things can actually be true at once. Trade-off discussions may be less about seeking to resolve and more about holding tension among values. And above all, I would say, as I'd like to close, wildfire, of course, is a powerful and unifying force. It's going to shape our future decision-making architecture in ways that we have not yet conceived. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nora. As I see, I'm quite naive in hoping that any speaker would give me an extra time for our 10 minutes behind the schedule gap, but thanks very much for this rich presentation indeed. I just see a comment in the chat that you can all look at, so I take this as not a question but rather sort of confirmation as well. Otherwise, let me go thus straight into the next presenter, and we are extremely happy to have a speaker from Austria. I hope Rafaela Helmer, you're there. You represent Department of Wood Policy, Bioeconomy and Innovation of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Environmental, Climate Protection, Regions and Water Policy. So this is really a big chunk of work your minister is doing. So Rafaela, I hope you're there, and over to you, hopefully that you can share your screen as well. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, and I hope you can see my screen already.
Yes, very good, thank you.
I will try to save some time, but let's see if I'm successful. Thank you for the opportunity to share some examples from Austria on this important issue of economic and biodiversity trade-offs in forestry. First, I want to start with giving you some numbers about the Austrian forest and the forest-based value chain. So approximately half of our country is covered with forest, and it's a very important economic factor. So every 10th euro is generated related to forestry and wood, and also every 11th job is related to this sector. So it shows the importance of this sector in Austria. And we also have a very old forest law that's from 1853. And here I want to show you the key functions that are also, of course, from the forest law of the Austrian forests. So we have a very long tradition in sustainable forest management, and we have these 4 key functions, and all forests focus, of course, or try to focus on all these functions, but there's one key function, and we see here it's On the one hand, the red, marked in red, the protective forest, that's where we have the Alps, so where the mountains, the main function is to protect the valleys from avalanches and other disturbances. Then the biggest part, it's marked in green, and it's the so-called productive function, where, yes, most wood we harvest comes from this area. And then in blue, we have the forest that focuses on, let's say, biodiversity and environmental function. Here it's called beneficial function. And then we have a very small area that's focusing on the recreational function. And as mentioned, these are the key function of these areas, but of course, all the forests have, all the functions to do. And to have a good dialogue between the many different stakeholders that are related to forests and wood use and biodiversity. In Austria, we have established a so-called Forest Dialogue. That's a national stakeholder dialogue that was established in 2003, and it's a participatory, open, and transparent process with different activities. As shown on the right side, we have different focus areas, and two of the focus areas are also directly related to the topic of today. So the economic aspects and biodiversity, because of course it's a, let's say, controversial issue. And yes, there are approximately 90 organizations, institutions, and individuals involved here. And within this forest dialogue, the national forest policy is shaped. And also the forest strategy 2020 plus was established with focus on sustainable functional forest management, and also, of course, the 3 dimensions of sustainability: social, ecological, and economic. And to monitor all these forests, we have different indicators that are all based on the Austrian Forest Inventory. So this is really recording the Austrian forests, and through that we can see all the changes and conditions of the forest ecosystems, how they develop. And it was introduced in 1961, and it's conducted regularly. On the right side, you see it's unfortunately in German, but I will talk you through. So one of the indicators is dead wood in the forest. And that's the indicator for biodiversity. And throughout the last years, this indicator was increasing. So let's say we monitor biodiversity mainly through this indicator, and that's recorded on a regular basis. And the data also focuses on other issues, like, for example, the forest area, of course, the species, the dynamics in the forest, the structure, and so on. And the last results are from the period 2018 to 2023. And to support this important sector in Austria, we have established the Austrian Forest Fund in 2021. It's a fund of 430 million euros, and it has different objectives, but 2 of the objectives are also directly related to, on the one hand, biodiversity in forests, and on the other hand, the use of wood as raw material. We have in total 10 different measures, and different activities and happening within these measures. And related to forest-based bioeconomy, we also have different activities, and I want to focus on that a little bit because it's within our department. So on the national level, we have a bioeconomy network. It's called Bioeconomy Austria, and it really supports local stakeholders to focus on bioeconomy and improve the activities related to bioeconomy. Then on the European level, Austria initiated.
Dear Rafaela, your time is actually already up, so if you could round up, please.
Yes, sorry. On the European level, we have Woodpop, and on the global level, we conducted the COLI Summit, also focusing on forest-based bioeconomy earlier this year. And with that, thank you, and I hope I could give you some insights on the Austrian forest sector.
Thank you indeed for this rich presentation. It will be also, for sure, as any other presentations that are shown today, that is good information for the OECD's work, as Dorothea was saying in the beginning. So I see for the moment no burning question in the chat. So to you, that's why we would go straight into our last speaker in this session from Latvia, Arvīts Ozols, who is forest expert and former long-standing forest policy director of the Ministry of Agriculture in Latvia, and also Director General Forest Service. I just mentioned maybe the main post that he was serving for many, many years. Arvīts, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Can you see my presentation, first slide?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for opportunity to share some experiences in this seminar. And as OECD program already frames the discussion around evidence, indicators, and policy navigation. So I will serve some examples from our Latvian forest policy developments concerning these issues. This trade-off is real because forests cover several mandates and just few moments. A bit more than half of Latvia is forest land. About 1/5 of national exports are linked to forestry and timber industry. And more than 3.3 billion, or around 230 euros per harvested cubic meter, are exported to more than 100 countries in the world. And this makes forest policy a question of rural livelihoods, industrial strategy, biodiversity, climate, water, landscapes, and all at the same time. And as I said, four pressures are converging at the same time. It's bioeconomy and supply, stable raw material supplies, value-added, biodiversity and ecosystem restoration, including strict protection, biodiversity as indicator, habitat quality, and all these things in connectivity, climate and resilience, legal certainty and trust. We had an interesting legal case in Latvia about this, and as a result, Latvia's policy challenge is not to choose one mandate. It's designed where, how, and under what safeguards each mandate dominates. And if we are coming back to what I already said, indicators. One indicator never carries a full decision, and all the decisions are normally based on number of indicators, number of information elements. And this coming from economic viability, outputs exports, value added per cubic meter, person per hectare, rural employment, processing depths, biodiversity conditions, habitat quality, deadwood, old forest, species trends, and climate and resilience. LULUCF, but not only, because forestry is creating benefits for climate change, not only through LULUCF. And what does it mean? It means that we have to triangulate. And I already heard that term already in one of the previous presentations, means that we have to base our decisions based on all available data, whether it's National Forest Monitoring, State Forest Service data, Nature Protection Agency data, Forest Research Institute modeling, ecological evidence, socioeconomic analysis, and even stakeholders' knowledge. And the paradox is that the best available evidence doesn't mean perfect certainty. And that's a very interesting thing will come later on. And doing everything everywhere has reached its limits. What I'm aiming for means that the place-based policy is a main issue, which is also what was already mentioned in previous presentations. And this actually means where the production is most resilient and lowest conflict. Where does strict protection deliver the highest biodiversity return? Where does the restoration also reduce climate and water risks, and where the recreation and landscape values dominate? And actually, the paradox is that specialization is not a fragmentation of policy. It's a kind of discipline, a system, which matches all the management objectives to the current site. And nature protection must become more dynamic. Because there are several reasons, but simple conclusion is that static maps are not enough because the climate is changing. And this means that dynamic approach combines habitat quality, not only percentage, but the quality, connectivity, not only isolated reserves, climate adaptations, because species and provenances are actually flexible. And technology we are applying, remote sensing, artificial intelligence, science policy, professional monitoring, all these things. I was just happily observing also were mentioned. And if you're looking on scale, nature restoration regulation indicators should strengthen, not replace, national monitoring and local ecological judgment. If you are looking to current situation in society, means that there is no foresters authority as it was sometimes ago. There are different opinions. And for example, for sensitive reasons, like in Latvia, for example, felling age, felling diameter rules. We need a policy sequence which is explicit and audible. And these are somehow very simple steps, but which have to be ensured that society, at least part of it, will at least try to understand what does it mean, and that this is not a threat to the forests and to the forestry. And this
Aritz, can you round up your
Yeah.
each presentation, please?
I'm just coming to rounding up, and the issue is whether Latvia can change the rules. It's whether we can justify changes with evidence, proportionality, and credibility safeguards. And that's my last slide. It's wrapped up 3 OECD takeaways from Latvia: make choices partially explicit and avoid hiding trade-offs behind the generate balanced language, use evidence as a learning system, triangulate indicators, and accept uncertainty within the monitoring. And move from static protection to adaptive safeguards means protect what matters both and update as climate and environment and our knowledge changes. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Arvids. I see no question at the moment for you, but I would just love to come back indeed quickly. If Raitis, you can help us navigate through one. There was one question to Bart Muis, which I think we could take now before we go into panel discussion.
So should I read it for Bart?
Yes, please.
I will.
Yes. So the question was, if I have understood it well, to get enough resources production while maintaining conservation areas, we need to increase intensive production forest areas instead of increasing multifunctional areas. Is it right? And in the case, are there any studies about this possibility?
Oh, it's quite a complicated question.
Arvids, I'm sorry. Arvids, I'm sorry. This was question to Bart. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Yes. Bart,
Yeah,
if you're
maybe
still
I can
there.
start and you can just complement. But yeah, thank you for your question. And it's more or less this, but not exactly. The idea is if we decide to increase the conservation area, and there's certainly in Europe a lot of pressure to do that, if we want to increase the conservation area in the forest while keeping our production level same, then the consequence will be that we will have to transform multifunctional forest into more intensively managed production forest. That's the consequence in this triad approach. We have a certain area in conservation, a certain area in multifunctional, and a certain area in intensive. And of course, there's our communicating vessels. If you increase somewhere in one, you will have to decrease in another to keep the amount of production levels the same. And we need to keep the production level the same because in the circular bioeconomy of the future, where we phase out the fossil fuels to control the climate change, we will need the forest products. We made a study where we showed that the whole petrochemical industry can be supported by wood from our European forests, and probably the same in North America. On the only condition that we stop using biomass for bioenergy, we keep all the other production the same, we keep the conservation the same, we have enough sustainable wood to provide the whole petrochemical industry.
Thanks very much for this rich answer. I hope it did address the question. And really, thank you for this first session. I hope that for all participants has been very rich and enriching. Hopefully that all speakers will agree to also share their slides after the dialogue, that then you can folks look at that even further after this event. Now I would like to straight hand over the floor to Daiga, who will lead us as moderator into the panel session. And we are 10 minutes behind the schedule, but I hope we'll manage anyway until the round hour with the panel and everything else that we need to do. Daiga, over to you.
Hello, many thanks, Ivar. My name is Daiga Zute. I'm working here in Paris at OECD. And today I will moderate this panel. So we will continue discussing trade-offs from different perspectives, from national perspectives and expert views. So our first panelist is from Japan. Mr. Keizo Namaura from Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. So, Mr. Keizo, the floor is yours, please.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Before starting my business, just let me introduce you. Who am I? So actually, I'm the one who started this initiative with Enrique a couple of years ago, because I was a secondary to OECD from the Ministry of Agriculture. So when we introduced our initial idea of this initiative at the Working Party of Rural, it was Ivas who gave us a great support for this initiative. So without his support, this initiative would not have started as it did. So I'm making an intervention from the far east of the globe to pay a tribute to Ivas. So because time is limited, so let me get on my business. All right. Japan has a highly diverse climate and rich in green resources. Approximately 70% of the country's land area is covered by forest. This diverse climate zones provide suitable environment for a wide variety of species to thrive. As a result, Japanese forests are generally rich in biodiversity. When discussing the trade-off between economic objectives and biodiversity, it is not straightforward to argue that planted forests inherently create such a trade-off. Approximately 40% of Japan's forests are planted forests. While they are primarily established for economic purposes, they also provide important ecosystem services, such as landside preservation and water resource conservation. In addition, planted forests can contribute to biodiversity conservation, as there are various ways to maintain and enhance biodiversity within them. However, trade-offs may occur mainly in two scenarios. The first concerns efficient timber production. Even aged stand of single tree species are often considered a way to raise timber productivity, but this can cause the loss of species. The second scenario arises when forests lose their economic values and are consequently neglected or abandoned. This can lead to the decline of grassland and young forests, resulting in the loss of habitats that depend on these environments. To address the trade-off between economic objectives and biodiversity, forest management in Japan has been implemented in a way that promotes a mosaic landscape consisting of both planted and natural forests. Last but not least, it is important to mention to increase the economic value of forests by promoting the cycle use of forest resources. This helps prevent the underutilization of forests and supports their sustainable management. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keizo, for the insight. And our second speaker is from Costa Rica. So we have today with us Catalina Esquivel Vargas from National Forest Financing Fund. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Give me 1 second to share the presentation.
So we will share presentation in once. You would like?
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming in a moment.
Yeah.
So how you would reflect on the trade-offs we are discussing today from the context of Costa Rica, please.
But not my presentation is the next one. Well, first, many thanks for inviting Costa Rica to share a little of our experience. So first, Costa Rica's environmental achievements are not the result of a single policy, but of decades of consistent public investment in conservation. And together, these milestones created the condition for the Payment for Environmental Services program to become a key to for balancing economic development and biodiversity conservation. And for the past 3 years, the country has been making conservation of efforts while taking economic factors into account. So I share the presentation.
Sorry for that.
Okay, no problem. So first, Well, this is our Costa Rica's environmental leadership. Nearly 100% of Costa Rica's electricity regenerated from renewable sources. Also, an important factor is that the environmental education is into the national education system. We have the forest cover has recovered to nearly 60% of the national territory after reversing deforestation. Another important factor to the country is that nature-based tourism has become a key pillar of the economy, and also the payment for environmental services program has been instrumental for maintaining cover, conservation, biodiversity. And some key lessons from managing policy. So the main lesson from Costa Rica is that managing trade-off is not about choosing between the economic and biodiversity. It's about like designing current public policies that align economic incentives with environmental goals. So in this case, you can see that we have like these policy currents. We have evidence-based decisions and inclusive governance and long-term vision. So trade-off can become synergy when public policy align incentive with ecosystem value. This is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Catalina, for your insight to Costa Rica. And our next speaker now is from Latvia, Mrs. Ilona Menziņa, Ministry of Smart Administration and Regional Development. And what would be your in general reflections on today's discussion? So we will share the slides.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the name of our ministry does not say that this Ministry of Smart Administration and Regional Development is in charge of the nature and biodiversity policy. And that's why I invited today here, and probably this is my main role, to be the devil's advocate here in this discussion of foresters. The presentation on the screen probably is not the most fancy one, but just to show that when my colleagues said that that the forests occupy a bit more than half of the territory of the country, then I would say that the biodiversity or the habitat features and we are legally obliged as an EU member state to protect and to ensure the federal conservation status occupy only 10% of the country's territory, and half of those EU Annex 1 habitat types are forests. Altogether, European habitat types, forest habitat types, occupy 10% of the total area of the whole forest. And our struggle is even in those 300,000 hectares which are the EU habitat types, to combine all those interests which are related to the forestry, timber production, etc. But I would say that that's one of the issues: the scale of assessment and scale of the policy decisions and measures to be taken, because 10% of the country territory probably is not the most biggest share of the country's territory. To combine all these and to say that there are lots of conflicts and trade-offs between economy and biodiversity. I would say that also this, so far we did not recognize in these interventions today the graduality of biodiversity. I would like to stress that even the plantation forests has a certain amount of biodiversity, but probably that is not the most valuable part. We need to protect, we need to conserve and provide the appropriate management for. Then one of the interventions said that investments into biodiversity conservation should be opportunity cost-based and also cost-efficient. I just wanted to say that a few years ago, we made the comparison based on assessment of economic value of ecosystem services and compared the investments into biodiversity conservation. And these are economically very, very comparable with investments in the urban infrastructure. It means that those investments into biodiversity conservation should not be biased towards the other investments in economic sectors. Sorry for exceeding my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilona, for insights. Now we continue with our next presentation, which is from OECD. And so I welcome my colleague Jonas Tikodis, economist from Environment Directorate, OECD. And in this case, I have a bit specific question to you. We would ask which challenges we need to overcome in order to issue policies and policy recommendations that will be useful for all OECD countries. The floor is yours, please.
And I think that's a very interesting question, Daiga. Thank you. And good afternoon to all the dear colleagues online. On behalf of the Environment Directorate colleagues in the OECD working on forest topics, thank you very much, Saivars, Daiga, and Enrique for organizing this excellent workshop today and for making us part of this panel, of course. Yes, I agree that one of the challenges of all these discussions is to, of course, derive some general policy rule or policy recipe that will be widely acceptable by countries. If that can come out of a discussion like this, that would be great. But we face, I would say, three challenges on doing that. We have to find a commonly acceptable framework to work with the largest number of countries possible. We need to understand that our evidence is context specific, as it was iterated many times today. And we also need to deepen our understanding on this evidence we have and enlarge this evidence. But let me depose some more specific thoughts on each of these items separately. As I think everybody knows, in this dialogue today, the OECD traditionally promotes policies after having accounted for a large number of costs and benefits these policies bring to different social groups and different countries. And in today's context, this means, of course, that the trade-off between biodiversity and timber production is a very important one. But the policy calculus we may end up, if we focus only on this trade-off, will be very different from the policy recommendations we may end up if we enlarge this framework to account for the multiple ecosystem services that forests are well known to offer. They stabilize the water cycle, they regulate local climate, control soil erosions, improve air quality, among many, many others. So the recommended policy needs to account not only for the trade-off we discussed today, but also very carefully for these ecosystem services. The question is, do we have the data to do it in a evidence-based way? And I would say the answer here is both yes and no. It's yes, because we have thousands of evaluation studies available in the literature today that tell us how people and societies value forest ecosystem services. But no, because we don't know exactly why the outcomes of the studies vary across the studies, these thousands of studies, and we don't know exactly how policies affect these services. So we need a better assignment understanding here, mapping understanding, I would say. So therefore, future data work needs to address
and take more seriously this context specificity. Back to you, Daiga. Thank you.
Many thanks, Johannes. And our next panelist is Mr. Aris Jansons from Latvia. And we have also a specific question. What are prerequisites to find better balance for both economic value and biodiversity? The floor is yours, Aris.
Yes, thank you. Could you please put also the text on the map? Just click on. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, just making a few points in relation to the given question. Prerequisites to better balance between economic and biodiversity values. In my opinion, there are two prerequisites. One is predictability. As mentioned in the introductory speech, there is a well recognized issue or need to improve increase the set of products that we obtain from renewable materials, namely wood and other parts from the trees, which means that we have to have a very substantial investment in the processing, and any substantial investment, of course, requires a predictable environment, meaning predictability of the potential for continuous production of the set products for some period of time. That means we have to ensure the predictability from the wood flow side, and also we have to ensure the predictability from the biodiversity protection side in the situation where our main way of improving biodiversity or increasing nature conservation, I would say, is increasing area. There is not enough resources and not enough effort that can be put towards improving the qualities of those areas that we are actually would like to improve. So we cannot really achieve the goal by just expanding and expanding. So the predictability, called also stratification or triada, application of triada principle, is essential. And the second essential part is mechanism organizing voluntary additional contributions to biodiversity. The current legislative environment in most of the countries that I have been trying to review, primarily that is still a mechanism of stick, not a mechanism of carrot, meaning that if the landowner improves a set of characteristics important for biodiversity, he or she increases the probability that that land is going to be designated as a nature reserve or other type of protected area without any compensation for the effort, and that type of policy environment doesn't encourage the owners or the forest managers to put even more effort on improving the biodiversity values. So this type of creation of those mechanisms and incentives is essential. Thank you.
Many thanks, Aris. But we still have some questions unanswered. And now I would like to ask again Mr. Keizo Nolamura to reflect on the question, how can policymakers effectively navigate competing demands and manage those trade-offs in the decision-making process for the context of Japan? Please.
Right. Thank you. The question given to me is decision-making process, but I myself, a policymaker, it's very much difficult and complicated. It's quite difficult to explain in just a given limited time because 2 minutes is given time to me. So I would say that when we policymaker make a strategy of policy, of course we started from the science evidence or data. However, every central government policy strategy need to be approved throughout the discussion of the national parliament. So when we come to the national parliament discussion, sometimes those scientific evidence are left behind. So I can't tell you why, how, but just instead of discussing the decision-making process, just let me share with you the Japanese strategy of how to manage the trade-off. So Daiga, could you share the slide of my presentation? I sent you 2 slides, but do you have one? No?
Not exactly. Please go without slides and.
Okay. So as discussed in the previous slide, the key to achieving both economic value and biodiversity is to establish different types of forest and maintain an appropriate balance between natural and planted forest. Achieving a well-balanced forest landscape requires site-specific forest management. For example, forests located in remote areas with poor accessibility should be maintained as natural forests, or if they are planted one, they should be returned back to natural one that require less human intervention. In contrast, forests located near roads and with good accessibility are more suitable for timber production. Furthermore, in forests located closer to urban areas, recreational and amenity values may be more important than timber production or other economic benefits. In this respect, Japan's approach to managing the trade-off between economic use and biodiversity conservation is to integrate utilization and conservation. To maintain diverse flora and fauna, a certain level of human intervention is necessary, as some species have adapted to the man-made environment and coexisted with human activities over time. Therefore, Japan adopts a balanced strategy that promotes both the utilization and conservation of forests. That's it on my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keizo. And the next question goes to Ilona Menziņa again. And we would like to ask, what is your opinion in situation in Latvia, nature conservation and the multi-functionality of forests? What possible future directions could be taken to improve the balance between economic development and nature conservation? Please, Ilona, could you share your insights?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that any decision, also in forestry policy decision, should be based on the country's international obligations, be them international or regional. It means that this sets certain framework. Although the forest policy is a national competence, the international framework, legal framework, should be taken into account. Secondly, I would say that the policy decisions should be based on honest data and fair indicators, and the policy decision makers should be brave enough to deal with uncertainties, especially those which are coming from the complexity of the biodiversity. And I would say that the policy makers and the lessons learned and the take-home message from this event, I would say that given the complexity of the biodiversity, we should not expect easy or single solutions which solve all cases. Neither static nor dynamic nature conservation will not deliver the expected results. And then I would say that we should look for the widening of our toolbox, both on the biodiversity side and also on the forestry policy side, because as we can see, the existing toolbox is too robust. We should be using more nuanced approach, both towards the forestry and also for the biodiversity. And then the last take-home message for myself, and probably quoting Mrs. White in the first part of the webinar, who said that they are approaching new mentality and looking for from what constraints to what is possible. Probably this mentality could give the new meaning also to globally renowned term biodiversity mainstreaming. And that's probably that. Yeah, these are my take-home message, and probably also that will also inform the biodiversity policy in Latvia. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilona. Now let's go to Costa Rica again. And could you, Catalina, share a bit on perspective of Costa Rica? How can policymakers effectively navigate competing demands in Costa Rica? Thanks.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The same question, like how can policymakers effectively navigate competing demands and manage trade-offs in the decision-making process?
Well, in Costa Rica, we have like the environmental factors or issues of the country is always on the policy agenda. So, for example, the past in May, we changed the government. Besides that, they also are very focused in environmental issues in the country. So this is very important because they are always trying like to maintain our environmental issues in the table. And for example, in the case of FONAFIFO, we have like a very strong institutionality. So it makes like easier like to maintain the program and also like to manage all the PS program too.
Many thanks, Catalina. And now there is another question for Johannes, our OECD colleague. And now we are coming closer to the final stage of the workshop. And I wanted to ask, could you kindly give us an insight on OECD environmental directorate work on the subject, like ongoing, past, or scheduled? The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daiga. And I think this question clicks to, what was iterated just before. Part of our obligation as OECD is, of course, to support policy decisions taken in the national level, with evidence. In the Environment Directorate of the OECD, we have done substantial work in the past, in particular on the role of economic incentives to sustain biodiversity and the provision of ecosystem services. In 2025, we launched a new program on forests that focuses more on the climate angle of that, together with CFE, our colleagues in SDD and in the Trade and Agriculture Directorate. And in the context of this project, we have been working with satellite data to develop more than 10 indicators showing how forests evolve globally between 1992 and 2020. And these are new indicators because they don't only focus on how forests expand or contract. Using more technical language, they are not forest extent indicators, but they expand to tell us if forests become denser or thinner inside. So they deal with the canopy cover within that and the distribution of this canopy cover. They tell us if they become more fragmented or more continuous, and what happens to the boundaries of those fragments that are, the areas of the forest that are mostly exposed to boundary risks. And we know that these indicators are relevant for forest biodiversity because the latter likes continuous forest habitats, and it likes also denser vegetation in general. But and in this sense, these indicators will be useful for discussions like the one we have today. But at the same time, they cannot provide definitive answers. Echoing another speaker from before, these are not direct indicators. They don't measure directly biodiversity or the drivers of it. For such answers, I think that we need to reiterate via this dialogue today that we need more direct and more systematic data. More direct data on biodiversity indicators. We need to hit it from different angles. I think this is one of the outcomes of this discussion today. on the performance of the forestry sector and on the policies in place. And we need this data, these indicators with substantial temporal resolution and spatial resolution if we want to have some kind of valid and generic conclusion for this trade-off. So when it comes to the future, we examine the possibility of our future work taking a more causal direction, if you wish. We plan to, we consider starting work on a global forest outlook in the next 2 years. And if that contains this kind of analytical work, upon completion, I think that it will issue some recommendations that will deal with most of the trade-offs that were mentioned today. But thank you again, and back to you, Daiga.
Many thanks, Ioannis. And to conclude our panel, now I would like Mr. Aris Jansons to reflect on the similar topic from the perspective of countries, how OECD can contribute for supporting countries like Latvia to reach a better balance between economic aspect and biodiversity. Aris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daiga. And I have a very simple task to give a very difficult task to a very capable organization. So I think I can manage with that. There are, I think, two main challenges that would be appropriate for the scale of the capacity of the organization. The one is already started by Ioannis about the biodiversity, but what we are lacking quite often is, or what we are lacking currently, I would say, is a comparative study on biodiversity protection legislation or biodiversity protection approaches across different countries in the same biome, and how or what of them has or has not worked, leading to measurable results. We have a lot of different types of reported case studies, which of course are positively biased, meaning that the reported case studies of a single species or a single habitat usually are reported those ones that have worked. We have very limited information on what has not worked, and also we don't have the holistic view on how those approaches are stated, even in so small geographical region as Europe, for example, where we have a completely different set of rules, for example, for Natura 2000 areas, completely different set of approaches, leading to quite a different outcomes across the countries. And the second block, which I think is untapped at the moment, is adaptation. There has been the policy emphasis on a global scale and also on a regional, meaning European scale, has been on the climate change mitigation, because we have the global agreements and we have to reach the targets. But the adaptation aspect is largely retained to countries themselves, or there are some vague statements about increased resilience, which is typically referred to as more diverse forest stands, and that's it. To actually figure out or recommend the approaches towards the forest adaptation is essential, because even if we could stop the climate change right now, could stop all the fossil emissions right now, at least for next 200-300 years, the climate change will continue because of inertia. So we desperately need the approaches on adaptation. And I would like to conclude with thanking the OECD on taking up the difficult topic of forestry already with the existing initiative. Thank you.
So many thanks, Aris, and kind thanks to all the panelists for sharing your insights. So we are a bit tight with the timing. Let's so have quick a couple of questions. Right? What is
happening in the chat. Are there some questions?
So there's a question from my side that I wrote as well in the chat. That would be interesting to hear from everyone this answer. I don't know, do we have time for that? But the question is, in your opinion, who should make the final decision on forest utilization, what and when, to what purpose is allocated? For example, what forest for biodiversity and what forest only for production? And for how long should this decision should be enforced? So, thank you.
Thank you for this question. Now,
It's hard choice to whom to address it.
I would dare to
address it to our Canadian colleagues. Nora, could you maybe try to reflect on
that from Canadian perspective?
Hello. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you're calling on me for this one, Daiga, but I'll do my best. So what we have here, at least in British Columbia, is a really interesting challenge on that front. Currently, the way that we have it set out is it is very much the provincial government's jurisdiction on that decision. And we've seen them make the decisions, set up the structures for the decisions, and then hold them in place for many, 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 many decades. And so that enforceability carries on, and the adaptability is lacking, perhaps. A challenge, though, that we have, what's changing that for us right now, is the rise of rights of the First Nations. So I mentioned in my presentation, we have over 200 unique and distinctive First Nations across just British Columbia alone. And this is true, of course, across Canada, with rights and title. And so we are approaching that through forestry, through joint decision making. It's an experiment right now. We only have 1 or 2 decisions that are starting to happen like that in forestry. But it is one way that we are approaching that challenge in our jurisdiction. I'll leave it there just in the interest of time. Thank you very much, Daiga.
Thank you so much, Nora. I see the hand raised by Peter Holgren. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say a few words to that question as well. And let me put it this way. The very fact that this kind of question is asked points to a problem that we have, in that it's seen as a matter for policy to decide how a particular forest should be used one way or another. It can't be. It's too complex. It's too local. It's too dependent on things that policy can't address. And of course, the ownership to the land is a major factor that needs to play in as well. So I would say that the very existence of that question is a problem, and that policy should be much more hands-off when it comes to the decisions on how a particular forest should be managed. But that said, of course, there should be policies at a higher level, more generic ones, supporting investments one way or another. But that's a different question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. If there are some final remarks on or questions from the presenters or audience, if not, then I thank you so much for all presenters and the panelists. And
now give the floor to my colleague from OECD, Ioannis, for conclude, and then Enrique for concluding remarks. Ioannis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much again, Daiga, and many thanks to all the dear colleagues for these very interesting perspectives today, and Latvia and CFE for organizing this very interesting workshop. From my side, just allow me to consolidate some of the messages that were here today, reiterate some of the insights that I managed to capture from the various speakers, and then add some concluding remarks. I think we had a very, very productive dialogue. We managed to articulate the various dimensions of the trade-off. And thank you very much for the analytical breakdown of this trade-off. It was very, very interesting to hear, the perspectives of different speakers. And echoing some of the opening remarks, I think that it's important to also say in the closing remarks that the trade-off needs to be managed in a transparent way. I would add also another thing that came out of the discussion, which is that it needs to be managed in the most economically efficient way as well. Because whenever we have, a trade-off like this, where, timber production comes maybe at the detriment of biological diversity, then at least we need to ensure, that the productivity of the former is maximized. So nothing falls down. So in that sense, some of the clever solutions that were proposed, in the beginning of the session, like the clever mix of land, by Professor Muis, I think they deserve their fair share of attention, and maybe we should need, a continuation of this dialogue where we will focus more on specific solutions like this to see whether we can derive a wider recipe from them that we can, communicate to the countries. Then I think a lot of emphasis was given to the data requirements, and I cannot echo that more. I think we all agree that we need more direct indicators pointing to production and to biodiversity. We need them with the maximum spatial resolution and temporal depth so that we can enhance our causal evidence about what causes what here. And we need to get a little bit closer to policy. I think I echo here that data classification systems need to incentivize forest management that favors biodiversity. This is another important message that needs to be echoed. And of course that, our perspective needs to be wider, not only in terms of, expanding to other trade-offs, like the trade-off between climate and biodiversity. It was mentioned that these two don't go hand in hand. And I echo that. There are, a lot of elements that don't go in the same direction. But we also, I think we need to articulate better that, this trade-off is part of a wider system, and that system also includes the ecosystem services. So maybe this workshop can be a springboard to create a more analytical framework that includes all those trade-offs and elements we need to take into account. And with that, let me thank you again, and back to you, Daiga.
Many thanks, Johannes. So with our very strict time management approach, we are almost there, almost managed. And with this, I pass to Enrique for the final remarks. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Daiga, and also thank you, Johannes, for already some very good concluding remarks. I hope we don't repeat each other, but reinforce what we said. I think in today's workshop, we had many speakers, limited time. We managed the time well. But I think we asked more questions than conclusions. I think, it's very interesting for me that we opened up different lines. From my side, I think, some results that stayed with me from the discussion is I was struck how some of the indicators and methods can really change the results that were presented. So it's very sensitive to how data is used, what the methods underlying are. I think it's quite interesting to know that there are multiple indicators. We're not starting from zero. There's a wide range of institutions already producing many indicators. But what I also found interesting is the need to recognize these multiple functions. We heard about the economic, the biodiversity, the climate, and of course these three things are not the same. From Austria, we also heard about the productive, the protective, the recreational, the beneficial typology that is being done, and also the multiple land use on conservation, multiple use intensity. So if we start to do indicators for each of these individual functions, then of course we get this proliferation of methods and data. And as already was mentioned before, think we need to start moving from these individual indicators towards more systemic ones, specifically if we try to better understand how these different legs talk to each other. And of course, the way that we presented the workshop was around trade-offs, but we also heard a lot about the complementarities that exist between all of these methods. So there's the first conclusion for me is we need to do more work on the data side. We heard how some of the new methods can give us new ways of collection, new ways of measuring, but also some of the problems around hallucination and noise. And I think what struck me a lot is when we presented a lot of these maps is the spatial element, when we add another layer to go beyond the country level, to really look at what's happening inside of countries. And we saw from some of the maps presented how they are spatially very concentrated, the different uses. So I think working with this spatial dimension is a way to go to articulate and to work with this context specificity. For that, on the governance side, I think I was really, we have multiple stakeholders, 90 organizations in Austria. We heard about 200 First Nations in Canada. And we really need to, if we go down at the subnational level, then we need to really work with this multi-level governance structure, thinking about different levels of government, different stakeholders, and really looking at the context specificity. I know that place-based approaches was mentioned before, but I really think that when we talk about forestry, that the context really matters when you think about these competing functions, when you think about how they interact and relate to each other. And it's not I wasn't very surprised that there's no overarching studies that come up with these conclusions, because it really changes from place to place. So I think it's very, very important to recognize this heterogeneity, to go down at this context, to address some of these trade-offs and try to build some of the complementarities. And I would agree that one of the best ways is, as my colleague Ioannis mentioned, is to think about transparency, to work with data on this front, to work also with a cost efficiency mind. And from our side, I think it opens a huge agenda, because from today's, we raise more questions than conclusions, but I think more work needs to be done. And I think this discussion was very, very useful for us. It can give us some very good insights on how to advance our work for Latvia. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody that participated in today's event. And back to you, Daiga.
Yeah, I think this is also a final remark. And again, from my side, sincere thanks to all presenters sharing your insights, very rich presentations, all panelists. Thank you so much. So I think with this we conclude. If there are some questions unanswered, and there are always some questions unanswered, if there are in our chat, then we will reply by email. So sorry a bit for timing. So with this, I really conclude. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.